Yeah, we're with David O'Reilly. Uh, we are going to discuss mass formation. It's a topic that Matthias Desmet, he's a clinical psychologist from Ghent University in Brussels, and he has indicated that mass formation is actually happening. Is actually happening at the moment, and that's why you see all the phenomenon with the mass and people doing pretty strange stuff, that doesn't really make sense. And he mentioned that there's four conditions that are required, and
Yeah, but it's so true what you're saying. Before we go into all those,
yeah,
how did this happen? It was a slow process. I think it's probably going back kind of a few years before that. I think, that the seeds were sown with different kind of, I wouldn't say deceptions, but it's kind of like where you get someone to accept something which isn't quite true, and then they know it and get them to accept it, get them to repeat it, and get them to practice it as if it is true.
yeah,
And I think that had been going on. I mean, to me, health and safety is a forerunner of all this,
for sure.
And there's
For
a lot of
sure.
issues around health and safety too, which are kind of the foreshadowing of this kind of thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, what you're describing there is basically that it was fertile ground for the introduction of COVID because of the because of all the various aspects that were brought in, the heavy-handed emphasis on safety and documentation and all this sort of stuff, and also the fact that I mean, there's massive separation of people, but yet it was displayed as more connectivity, with the media and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's presented as a good thing. I mean, 30 years ago, we didn't even have NCTs on the cars. And, the freedom we had back then was, just to imagine it then, life was much simpler, much more direct. People actually looking back could seem to at times make a lot more money. I mean, both yourself and myself have been have run businesses or trades, and we've had to employ people, we've had to do health and safety, we've had to do all this stuff, we've had to get the insurance, and a lot of that. Looking back at it, I remember the first time somebody came along to the motorway and explained the rules around signs to us, and we were expecting it, we were prepared for it, we'd done the course and everything. But the five of us gathered round, and this Polish guy jumped out of the lorry, said, the importance of the safety, and we knew that this was just something we had to agree to get the job done, because we had no choice. So it was all like nods, and nobody actually discussed whether it was safer or anything. It was just, and I often think, looking back at there, that was the place to start clamping down on it, question it, but sure, it's advanced now.
Yeah, but that was kind of, I suppose, that was even a precursor to the four conditions: the lack of bonding, lack of meaning, and the increase in anxiety and the increase in aggression. Like the lack of bonding was like created from the social media platforms, where there was a kind of a superficial connectivity,
Yeah.
you know, where you were joined up with all these friends or whatever,
Yeah.
and you were superficially connecting, you know, and but in fact, what was happening was, in a human sense, you're actually separating, you know, and that was definitely that's like that was
Yeah.
ramped up since, I suppose, the 90s, but
Yeah.
before that, even with the introduction of television, that was
Yeah.
perceived to be, oh, this was going to be a really a revolutionary you know, thing, that we're all going to be able to see what's happening in the other part of the world or whatever. But in
Yeah.
fact, what was happening was it was kind of superficially and deviously presented as something that would help us, when in fact it's
Yeah.
actually turning in on itself now, and it's causing us more hassle now, and more trouble, and it's coming down on us really, really heavily, you know.
Yeah, it was presented to us as kind of sophisticated, that this was the way other people did it, and this was part of modernizing and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we had a really good direct kind of culture and society then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
things would you could get stuff done by just doing it,
Yeah.
and so many people just didn't. There was the state interference just wasn't there. The overreach wasn't there,
Yeah.
and we've, as so many things in Ireland, we've gone from an extremely unregulated
Mm-hmm.
society to a very regulated
Yeah.
society,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so we're going to discuss that whole
Yeah.
process and the psychology behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And like with the EU as well, they kind of created that the fertile ground again for human separation,
yeah,
you know, because of the the discouragement of self sufficiency, and the increase in the subsidies, kind of like
yeah,
follow the subsidy. And
yeah.
okay, the
Follow the
farmers at
money.
the time would have said, okay, well, we'll do this because we're actually getting some money or whatever,
Yeah,
and we can go in this direction. We can go with sheep
yeah,
for while the subsidy lasts here, and
yeah,
then move over to the cattle when the subsidy changes, you
yeah,
know. But in fact, the self sufficiency then was discouraged,
yeah,
and it was kind of like a silent separation as such, I suppose you could call it, and at the same time, you had the farmer getting busier and busier because they were getting more mechanized,
yeah,
and they had bigger tractors and stuff to try and produce more to ensure that the what they got dragged into, the materialistic kind of larger house or whatever, that
yeah,
they had to sustain that. And now you probably see that you see young farmers out on the road until maybe 10 at night, roaring down
yeah,
the road in a John Deere, and in the morning maybe getting up at whatever time, 8, half 8,
mm,
and their partner or wife going off to maybe a large tech company and dropping off the kids, and maybe
yeah,
seeing each other on the way at home, like when they arrive home maybe 7 or 8 o'clock, and same thing again. So basically, what the perception was, that the increase in technology would make life better, but in fact it's actually holding people down
it,
to, you know.
it is. I mean, we have access to technology. We have probably a much higher turnover of money,
Mm,
but yet what we need, or the basics like a home, um, our ownership has changed. We don't
mm,
have ownership. So what
mm,
the really valuable assets are becoming harder and harder
that's
to
for sure.
hold on to. I think this time it is worth saying that I have parked outside my house. There's 4 cars going.
Mm-hmm.
The kids have
Yeah.
cars. I have cars. That wouldn't have been possible back in the 90s.
No, no.
Most people had 1 car and maybe the tractor to go down to the shop with.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
but so there is. I mean, I think even today, Ireland is probably one of the still quite a high growth rate
Yeah.
in Europe, and that's really because of all the the globalist stuff. You know, the big and we all work. I mean, you
Yeah.
probably worked for a few of them,
Yeah.
and
Still do. Yeah.
and I know that my roads contracting probably wouldn't have happened without the kind of budgets that the councils had for presenting things nicely. You know, so it's not it's not that we want to go back to drawing water
No.
from the well or anything
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
it? You know, but we have to talk about how this has affected us negatively, and it very much has.
Yeah. For
I
sure.
mean, this has almost enslaved us,
Yeah.
and we haven't been enslaved by armies. We haven't. We've almost been enslaved by health and safety, and so we have to kind of chew it over and see what the psychology is that leads us to be to accept and repeat and make things which are not common sense or even
Yeah.
true
Yeah.
or justifiable part of our lives.
Yeah.
And it happens, people do it all the time, and in
Yeah.
history have done it. So go on, Mike, let's
Yeah.
see what the process
Yeah.
is.
And then, well, we will move on to the second one then, which is the lack of meaning. And I suppose over the last 30, 40 years, slowly the Christianity has been diluted in this country. And I know for myself, I did question why the Sunday was was removed, as like it became kind of another shopping day as such, you know. So even if people like didn't go to mass, it was always Sunday was always that day of reflection, you know. And you'd have your own like your personal God, and you may not go to mass or whatever, so there was that day of personal reflection, you know. So now what's happened is that cycle has been taken away, whereby it's kind of everything every day is the same, and there's a lack of preservation of or an indication towards preserving the spirit or something beyond being human. So that's basically that's basically the way I'd say it. And preservation is a word that I love to use the word preservation, because and I just go back to the material things at the moment, like washing machines, dryers, whatever. Your white goods in your house, it appears that like they only have a cycle of about maybe 4 to 5 years, and they're not preserved whatsoever. And like years ago, you'd have a washing machine, and you go and you fix the bearings, you do something, you keep it going for another while, and you preserve it, and and
you wouldn't have half the clothes to wash in it either. You know, that's the thing.
And yes, there's this juggernaut of green policy coming in, saying that we have to do this and do that, but yes, at the same time there's a kind of a throwaway assimilate. It's basically, I suppose, you could say predictive breakdown in a lot of equipment, like you could almost, I've often heard a person say, well, you know what, my machine, it just reached the guarantee and it broke down. And that's kind of the way I look at it. It's kind of like you're perceived as being pushed along into the green policy, the green agenda, or whatever, when in fact really what we had in the past was probably a lot more sustainable, and it preserved and it also preserved the spirit as well, the spirit of communities and your connection to God,
There is, and there's a basic honesty in what you're saying there. To manufacture something into a machine that causes it to not reach its potential, that used to be something that people would call deceptive, dishonest, a con job, and that kind of thing. But not so much now. And even the way that marketing is always trying to fulfill the most potential for extracting money out of people, and the way people are are treated by companies now today. I mean, they're the ethicalness, the sense of decency, the common sense, that has been eroded. I mean, especially if on your phone, if you say the phone company, they'll have a if you owe a couple of quid, and it could literally be a couple of quid, and they will be telling you the process by which they're going to fine you and stick you in jail. And even like the bottle banks there, you go and wash your bottle, and you bring it along and give it to them for nothing. And there's a camera up there and a voice shouting down at you, if you leave any bottles behind, we'll come after you, we'll sue you, we'll all this. And the threatening way that companies treat, they're just straight through the post, straight into lawyers, straight into threats. That is, when being treated differently, when not being treated as part of the team, part of the county, part of the parish. These aren't parish relationships anymore. These are, I mean, you treat someone like that in the parish, and there could be 10 years of, when you're an old man, you'll remember that, the way they treated you. But these, we have accepted being abused to a level that we would never allow other people to do it, simply because the company's far away. That we're only negotiating with them over the phone, through the emails, and like you're saying, the lack of bonding is creating this tyranny already. Because there is a lack of accountability and a lack of engagement. And I think the first thing, the lack of bonding, is going to come up over and over again. And you see it in the more advanced country, and I was reared mostly in the UK, and I was aware of the difference between the industrial world of the UK, where you're a cog in the wheel, your place, and you've got to get it, knuckle down and get on with it, and that kind of stuff. Whereas back here, when I would come back to Ireland, there would be a different attitude. There would be an attitude of consensus, concerned about what other people think, and that's a really good thing. And it's in my opinion, it's a remnant of a clan culture rather than an industrial culture. And see, we have that. Even in our recent memory, and now we're exchanging that often, and it's so true. We exchange the best of what we have for the worst of what's on offer, and I think we need to stop doing that.
And another thing too that I suppose would be part of the lack of meaning, and that has come in over the last 30 or 40 years, would be pornography, and since Woodstock and stuff like that, where basically that a certain enjoyment would be achieved by by looking up these pornographic sites or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying I'm a holy Joe or anything like that.
Well, there's an obvious appeal in the women,
of course,
and the imagery. I mean,
but like, it was superficially presented as a kind of you should be what would you say, you shouldn't be ashamed of your body or whatever. And this kind of thing, when in fact I go back to the word that I love to use is preservation. Preservation of yourself or whoever,
and preservation of innocence. Preservation of innocence, because an innocent heart is a caring heart, and an experienced heart is a hoary, stony heart, and when people have been betrayed enough and abused enough, they're very protective, and it actually takes time for people to soften up and become caring, and that's why so many relationships don't even have a chance. One, because people don't know how to do relationship because they're not engaging with people in a in to the level you need to do to, for a family to happen.
Yeah.
And the commitment isn't there. I mean, people are more inward looking, and they need to um, inward looking in a bad way, because you have to care about yourself as well. But more, you have to be a bit more objective to consider the process of committing yourself to someone. And also, back in the day, people knew what to expect. And I was just talking to a girl today, and she was asking me about evangelical churches. And I said, I remember Galway Christian Fellowship, and it was probably the first non-Catholic church apart from the traditional Protestant ones. And I said to her, back in, say, 1990, half of Irish girls were getting to marriage still as virgins, and it was a very different Ireland. And people knew what was expected of them because there was a cultural expectation, but there was also a faith expectation. It had been taught to people the wisdom of how to behave and how to commit to people. And in the end, they were having a lot more family was producing a lot more success in terms of sticking together and having children than they are today. I think the faith thing too is, we'll probably come back to that in a second. But what were you thinking, Mike?
That would be true. I was just thinking, the fact that when there is a lack of meaning, and you're just going along day in day, there's a tendency to develop a lot of projectionism, and that can happen when you don't have, let's say, when you don't have that faith to kind of bring you through, the projectionism or whatever that you may receive or you may give. You don't seem to have the strength to I suppose to control it, and look to a higher power to maybe get you through, so that's kind of the way I look at it.
I mean, a sense of purpose and vision. You have a purpose for your life because God has put you on the earth for a reason, and you're in an understanding with the whole heavenly kingdom. The angels, are looking after you, and you have a place, and a purpose and a destiny. And that's, so from that point of view, there's no question of what's your destiny. It's how do I manage my destiny successfully. And I mean, faith is another thing which is empowering, because faith is believing in something you can't see. And much of, for a young man anyway, to his family is something he can't see. It's something he has to believe in for the future, and he has to pursue. And that whole idea of faith, that things are possible, that you can be blessed, that God wants you to fulfill your destiny, really puts you in the position where you're going to try and do it. And it also, so that helps people to, I don't know if that's what you mean by projecting or protecting protectionism, but that's a big help to people.
But the projectionism would be like, let's say, for example, if let's say you were a bit stressed and you went to work, and a manager starts roaring and shouting and giving out to you or whatever, and you're kind of not strong enough to say, hold on, you know what I mean, hold on a second, you're talking to me now here, you can't treat me like that or whatever. But projectionism would mean like that, oh, you'd head home and you'd actually project to your partner and say, this fellow was a complete whatever, do you know what I mean? And so in other words, you haven't really got any, you're just basically saying that I couldn't deal with it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You're not processing it yourself.
No processing. So I mean, and you don't feel that you have the power as such, and that's why I say like that. Having that something outside your human ability to connect with is very important, and having a faith. It's very important, and like.
Well, it gives you a feeling of security, and then you don't have that existential kind of questioning of that what is the meaning of my life, and my life becomes meaningless. Then nothing matters. Then you can make up your own reality because nothing matters, and then all of a sudden you don't see the need for things like forgiveness, and and that's one of the things about projecting, that when people don't process their own feelings, they tend to overexpress things rather than control them. And they also, the whole woke agenda, the whole cancel culture is unforgiving. And they have no process of resolving things. The process is to exterminate stuff. And that is that's not how you build a understanding and caring society.
For sure.
And the fact that we have these traditions that have been here for thousands of years, the wisdom of 20 generations is in our culture. And we're abandoning all that, and we think that we can just make it up ourselves, and then it's much more complicated than we'd imagined, and then we can't cope, and then nothing matters, and you're back down to that purposeless thing again.
But and I go on to the next one now. The third one and the fourth one, they're all basically intertwined as far as what I can see anyways. The increase in anxiety, because the increase in anxiety would come from a lack of bonding, and also in the increased stress of the push for twin income families over the last whatever 30 years, 40 years, whereby it was kind of superficially, the woman had a right to be out working as well, when in fact a mother in the home is that's a valued position as well, a wonderful position, but that the fact that both parents are out working, that can cause massive stress, and that increased anxiety, but also the lack of meaning, and this cycle where you're continuously doing stuff all the time and you're not stopping to reflect or whatever. That will increase the anxiety, and of course the money issue, and the fact that self-sufficiency is practically gone in this country. I hope it will come back sometime. That's and then the fourth one then is the increase in aggression, and that's driven. A lot of it is driven through the media. We should look after this group of people. You know what I mean? You're not such a nice person because you didn't treat this group of people. Look this way. Look at this group. You know what I mean? Look at how downtrodden they are. So rather than looking at the whole picture, it's like cherry picking. There's a kind of like there's a massive cognitive bias in the media, and whereby they'll always look for something that will drive their narrative. And that's and I suppose they have to follow the cognitive bias as well, because that's what they're paid to do. You know what I mean? Which is totally superficial to what they're supposed to be there, because they're a public service.
It's tricky because they're it's the commercialization of
Yeah.
society, and that has created these conditions. And then on top of that, there's an awareness that we've lost something,
Yeah.
and that we lack an ethical or moral purpose, and so there's this attempt to create a morality where you are just nice to people, or where you're seen to be virtuous in some way, or the importance of it, and it's just not working because it's not sophisticated enough. It's really just window dressing. It's an excuse. It's an excuse for why we haven't got a or it's a replacement. It's a very poor replacement for what we had, but it's a sense that we had to throw something out there, and that's why it doesn't work. I mean, you know, but going back to the commercialism, um, this is where we this is where we have engaged with a dispassionate way of life, and this is what forces us to comply. We had our own way of going. Like even when I was working, oh yeah, well my one's still good enough. But even when
Is yours still going?
yeah, no, it's still going.
Yeah.
Even when we were still say with yourself and the guys you work with, and me and the guy I was working with, we could work stuff out, and he could tell me if he thought I was being an idiot, and whereas there isn't that relationship in the commercial world, and it depersonalizes people, and the relationship is really one of compliance. And it's layers and layers of compliance. So, as an employer, you have to have a duty of care to your workers because you have an insurance premium, or you've got to mind your insurance, and you've got to make your health and safety statement, and then these laws are required by not only the government but international recommendations. So even our own government has no control over these, but they're just delivering us into the global system. So the idea that we can have that conversation where you say, actually boss, I think that's a load of rubbish, we need to do it this way, that can't happen anymore. What are the rules? The rules are that you have to comply, and so what happens is we get something like a box, and 20 years ago it was when the health and safety came in and we had to get our ticket, and someone would explain to you that you can't lift this box like that because you're at risk of injury. And if you get injured, well, the insurance company is going to this, and the law says that, and you're going to end up. So you've all of a sudden lifting the box is a big problem, and we all knew we could lift the box. And but now we're starting to say and repeat practices which we know are not true. So they've said to us something which is dubious. We've had to accept it because we've no option except to comply. And then all of a sudden, we're participating in dishonest practices. And it's the same with the mask.
That's it, yeah.
We know that the masks don't work. They all said it at the beginning. But yet, now, everybody feels they have to comply. And we all go through the practice of doing the thing which we know isn't true. And so you will get believers. I mean, there will be believers who will believe that the box can't be lifted. And you will, but in practical terms, the box has to be lifted. Somebody has to do it. And it's the same with the social interacting. And we've actually seen the local economy be shut down for the sake of the global economy. So now we're in a position where, we have almost accepted that we're all going to be on the internet to China with our credit cards for buying stuff rather than interacting with our local community.
Exactly,
So this is how it happens.
And like with the 4 conditions, and like we've laid it out, they're pretty good, I would say. The 4 conditions that have been met previous to COVID, and then when COVID came in early 2020, and there was a lot of fear and anxiety, and then the media gave the solutions. So basically the anxiety that people already had was latched on to the COVID anxiety, and with a massive amount of propaganda on the media and pushing the fear, they were also giving a solution. So in fact what happened, the group, the mass, they all basically had tunnel vision towards the one focus. And that was the COVID. So it was like COVID was the only show in town basically, and it was, I suppose it was almost like a religion, and it is almost like a religion, whereby people, didn't matter what they heard or seen. And I thought it was a bit peculiar at the start. I thought, surely people are going to find out now. But what was happening was that the people had developed a cognitive bias towards the fact that they didn't want to lose this massive group that they were in. And really that's the problem now. That group has to be broken, it has to be splintered away, and it's really difficult because sometimes and I would say that there's phrases used on the people that are awake that can also cause little mass formations to be created, such as purebloods, which I hate. I cannot stand that, because that can kind of, that can cause another mass formation, because really we're all basically
we can form our own bully group where we don't we coerce our own people to, but that won't help. We are well, at the beginning I was stunned how many people put the mask on. I didn't think people would do it. And then all of a sudden you realize everybody's doing it. And so there's this habitualization towards compliance that people in institutional jobs have. So they realize that there's no way out of this. We're just going to have to do it. And so then they're looking for excuses to do it. And so it's much easier to go along with a narrative whereby, which where you don't even, the issue of is it right is a problem. So we don't even do that. That's the way they're thinking, is we can't even go there. And so what's happening really is there's a relationship with coercion happening. And people don't want to say it like that, but that's actually what's going on. And so and we see it in the figures. I mean, 75% of people don't want to be double jabbed every year. And 70% of people didn't want the lockdowns, but they went along with them. And that was, when the law comes into it, that's coercion. It's what are you going to do? And most of them are going, well, if I end up doing this, I'll be in real trouble. And then the fear of breaking the law, the fear of the unknown, and we all had to face it. I mean, we all had to, many of us who objected and resisted had to get, we got arrested, or we were all at a risk of arrest, and we went through a process of being handcuffed and put in the cells, and that's traumatizing. And it's meant to be traumatizing. And so people didn't want that trauma. And so rather than an ethical question of do these masks work, what is the benefit of wearing them, and shouldn't I question this? There really wasn't any
discussion.
Even if they did question it, it was pointless to question it because there was nothing they could do about it.
Yeah.
They had to do it, and so for a lot of people, they knew that this was nonsense, but they went along with it. But for a lot of other people, and this is where you get the 30% mass formation,
yes,
that end up being the really crazy guys who are willing to persecute and and go to the totalitarian lengths with people. Those guys wanted the narrative to be true, because they wanted to retain their sense of ethical righteousness.
Yeah.
So they didn't want to. They wanted to see themselves as as righteous, and they didn't. And so they knew that if this was a load of nonsense, and they were going along with it, that's a conflict, and for a lot of people, that's not acceptable for them. So they choose the accepting the narrative and enforcing the narrative, and this is the idea that we have many different truths, and this is one of the problems we have is that say going back to our religion, you've got in Revelation the whole idea of the mark of the beast, that that there will be a world government who will mark people with and that they cannot trade or participate in society unless they take it, and if they do that, they will find themselves as living an offense to God because they are commercializing themselves when in fact they're a spiritual living being in an eternal an eternal story. And so rather than face any of that, they will just believe what they want to believe, and that's the narrative which is sent there. So and they're so dismissive of anything else, and those are the guys who then say, well, they told me, the authority told me, and these are the authoritarians, and they're unquestioning, and the whole mark of them is they have no references. They have no framework of morality because anything can be. And essentially it goes back to just the bullying. I'm going to pick on you because I feel like I'm going to find something to pick on you for.
Yeah.
And we're all in this together and we can tell you what goes. And that is where it is. But after the event, we all know that. But of course, people those kind of people aren't going to own up to it. They're not going to take responsibility for it. And we're going to be left with another round of dishonesty to sort out once this is all over.
Yeah, as Matthias says, it's the 40% really in the middle that really have to be kind of targeted as such, and just keep speaking the truth. And you would hope that the pendulum would swing towards the truth, if you continue to kind of chip away at it, and to use the minimum amount of force to achieve your objective. That's probably the way I think that was the way he was trying to describe it. And as far as he wouldn't have been in agreement with using any form of violence, but I presume in self-defense you would have to do something, if they started knocking on your door. But I would hope that it doesn't come to that. I know that he did say that mass formations always turn in on themselves, and it does end in
Yeah.
In genocide a lot of the time. And if you continue to discuss the truth or keep talking the truth, that can be alleviated at that point,
Yeah.
just before a massive genocide to cover their tracks.
I mean, we can look at our own genocide, the famine.
Yeah.
There was a narrative and a counter narrative there. The narrative of the time was that, from the government, was that there are too many Irish people and they can't support themselves. And that was the Congested Districts Board. And the solution for that was emigration. And I'm sure you would have heard many people at the time saying, well, they're better off in the States, and we can't this, and you may have found that one of the striking things about the famine is that we have almost no stories from it. We have no heroic tales because complying with your own destruction, there isn't anything heroic to talk about. And so people were just ashamed and didn't want to talk about it. And that's the big thing we get from the famine now. And so I think that going back there, establishing a strong counter-narrative as early as possible. And they were under censorship. There was things they couldn't say in court, in public, and it's no different for us today. And but somehow they managed to come up with the Republican counter-narrative, and the one which said that the occupation of Ireland by a imperial force that has no interest in our benefit, but wants our resources for their purposes and vision in the world, rather than the other way around. The other way around would be that Ireland is capable of using the resources from all over the world to benefit its own purpose and vision, which would be what we should hope to do in the situation we're in now. But we've kind of gone back to we're kind of moving back towards a position where we have lost our sovereignty, we've lost our economic sovereignty, we've handed another sovereignty away to the EU, and so we're kind of going back to those kind of conditions again. And maybe it's happening much more quickly than we realize.
That's for sure.
But what we need to do now is establish. So we are deplatformed, we're cancelled, but we can still talk. So we can be the billboard. We can be the people who say the narrative. And so if we establish now a strong narrative, a strong counter narrative, that we all support and that we pump out to the people, we can get in ahead of their narrative. And whereas it took 70 years from the famine to the rising, hopefully we can, if we get the narrative in early enough and counter their narrative quickly enough, we could cut that down to hopefully a decade or two. And that's what we need to be doing. And in order to do it, we have to reach those people who know this is bullshit, but haven't gone to the point of convincing themselves of or wanting to believe the state narrative for the sake of their own righteousness' sake. They're doing it. They're not willing to be hypocrites. They're not willing to be self-righteous. They are still honest people, but they're just they're people who are not acting honestly, but in their heart they know they're not willing to give up on reality and adopt a new reality, the new normal. They know that the old normal is common sense, and that is reality. So those are the guys we have to win over, and they will mostly be vaccinated people. So like you were saying about our own mass formation of that, the vaxxed and the purebloods, that we just can't do that. And what helped me was getting very sick with COVID, or whatever it is. whether it's genetically modified, whether it is a naturally occurring virus,
Mm.
or whether it's a bacteria or some of the things that other people are saying. Whatever it was quite, and for other people too, probably one of the most severe doses you'd got. Now, survivable, treatable, all that, yes. But, when we start saying COVID is a hoax, there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of hoaxy stuff around COVID. But to say COVID is a hoax, people know that people get sick, and that's why they got vaccinated. So we've lost them with that narrative. So we've got to try a different narrative. And even RT is the virus. But RT isn't actually a virus. It's we've got to get more specific now. We've already condemned them, but we now need to draw them in and love them, and talk to them in a respectful way and win them on side, to our narrative, to our worldview. So
yeah. Well, when Micheál Martin said that he didn't want the country to go back to like a dated, old-fashioned Ireland or whatever, I mean, like what is he presenting? But like we can see exactly what he's presenting. He's presenting big tech companies coming in here, and they're basically running the show. In fact, we're losing our sovereignty as such, and that's basically they have massive lobbying power. The GDP is I don't know what it is, something 55-60%, from all the big tech companies. So you could say that if the Irish indigenous industry, if they were kind of reduced by 10-15%, it wouldn't really matter that much as such in their figures that they produce, because it would be made up by the big number from the big tech. So how you can get that across to the general public, because the general public are already tied into it, because they go to work and they spend their 10 hours multiplied by 5 or whatever in the week. We have to present a better way for this country, and in the COVID thing as well, we also have to line ourselves up and also debunk that at the same time, which is a difficult task, but it is highly possible, because you can actually see it more clearly now. The COVID has actually revealed an awful lot about what big corporations are doing, and it wasn't so easily 10 years ago, but in fact they're doing it now in the daylight, basically.
It's John. You've got to come in a little. They're losing you on the screen. But no, I totally agree with what you're saying, Mike. I mean, it goes back to the debt, and we were 200,000 in debt, and with the crash, rather than resolve it, the international financiers were happy with us staying in debt, and because it gave them control, and the control was that we can come into Ireland with our global investment funds investing in your housing. So we can make money at that by turning you into rental units. And the other thing we can do is bring in our multinational global companies. And in fairness, I saw figures there that Ireland has a 13% growth rate. And, on paper, that may well be true. I think we still have one of the fastest growing economies. And despite the fact that nobody feels it, and this is the thing, is that the cost of living has gone so high, and the wages are just not giving people any quality of life.
Really tallying up with a proper socio-economic existence, whereby you can.
So we're not seeing 13% growth every year ourselves, and so we're locked into that,
Mm.
and that's part of our problem
Mm.
is the debt, and the
Mm.
global. The we are governed by international recommendations,
Yeah.
and but the thing that John Waters was saying was that, okay, we've got all these globalist corporations here. They should leave some residual benefit in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
So we should be adapting um, our rates in order to create some benefit for the people living here.
Mm-hmm.
And these corporations don't have to be a bad thing. That we can. It's all about having a vision for our own country rather than somebody else's vision,
Yeah.
and having control. And that's why, in order to win our country back,
Mm-hmm.
we could elect 80 people to the Dáil and change uh, our policy, but we would then get to the place that Enda Kenny got to, which was we're not gonna supply any money to the ATMs next week.
Yeah.
We're gonna cut, and so that's the challenge we have. We've got to not only win our spaces back, we've got to win. We've got to prepare for a economic war with the financiers, and I don't know how that works, but somebody's going to have to work out how to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there are places that have places like I think there was a Eurasian company country that published the terms that the IMF were given the country, if they complied and if they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Hungary and these places and Poland probably quite a lot to learn from them, rather than being the best boy in Europe, which isn't working for us.
Yeah, the best boy in Europe doesn't it doesn't cut the mustard now, really, because it'll be unsustainable. Probably the resources will have to be. Well, I wouldn't be in favour of it anyways. Selling out more resources. Definitely wouldn't. I'm never a favour of that. But the amount of leverage that there is from the employees of the big tech, the pharmaceutical companies in this country, the amount of leverage and what the employees bring home with them, and that is also the perspective and the optics of COVID. What the employees brought home with them. In other words, they had to conform to really tight guidelines as far as mask wearing and all this sort of stuff, and tests and stuff, and that leverage was brought home to the homes and brought into the shops, whereby these employees were basically brought into the mass formation, and they had no problem going into the shops, and that perspective and that optics was created for other peoples to look at, and basically it was just a fear tool, and
they become habitualized, like the man in the army that tries to run his family military lines,
Yeah.
So have we got through it all? Is there
I think we're not too far off there now, right? Not too far off. So what would you be ending on a let's say a positive note? What would you say would be the possibility, or what route forward would you think that could possibly bring us out of this? And also, do we need something to happen in other countries? It looks like we do at this stage.
Ireland that's so often the case, that what happens in France or in UK saves us from our own social problems. Much of the health system was built just, what are the Brits doing? And so that could easily happen. And of course, we've seen that soon as Boris Johnson opens up, we open up. So there is, like we were talking about the Irish leadership, going to Europe with an attitude of, please can I be your friend? That's not statesmanship. You're just you're looking for approval, looking
Yeah.
for it's pathetic,
It is.
and and with the begging bowl as well,
Yeah.
it's so leadership is a big, and in my opinion, we haven't had statesmen since, I mean, Charlie Haughey would have had some statesman-like ship about him, Badenoch as he may have been,
Mm-hmm.
and Eamon de Valera, Badenoch as he may have been.
Mm-hmm.
He was a statesman, and Charlie Haughey stood up to Maggie Thatcher, and so did, and in their own way. Now we would have liked them to have done a bit more, but they're not as they would certainly didn't have the attitude of please can I be your friend,
Exactly. Yeah.
and so leadership is and having a vision, so having understanding what our purpose is, which goes back to our constitution, our sovereignty. What is the purpose of Ireland? What is its place in the world? What do we do and represent to other countries and nations? And what is it that we should be fulfilling as a destiny for our country and for our people? And the whole idea, let's say we go to our golden age, like the age of saints and scholars, and that was when it was a post-Roman era. We'd had the collapse of empire, but we still had all these people from all over the world and all these trade routes that had been established. And so what we did was we established an Irish vision, and we got the resources and the people from the rest of the world to come and serve this vision. And that's a model for Irish nationalism, an inclusive nationalism of all the people, all the Polish, all the people who are here.
Yeah.
They're an asset, and so are all the things that we, the trade routes and everything.
Yeah.
But it's about focusing on our own benefit and our own purpose. Whereas at the moment, empire, like the globalism, it's our people and our resources being used and drained for somebody else's profit and somebody else's benefit and somebody else's wealth. So we got to turn the whole thing around and get the vision, get the culture back into people, so that people aren't habitualized to that kind of commercial existence. Get people back to their language, to their culture, to their music, to their communities, which are not far away.
And we have to be stronger. And there recently now the Irish language was recognised in Europe. That again is superficial, and that's just it's mealy mouth. They should be a lot more stronger than that. This is not what Ireland is about. It's just chicken feed. It's nonsense, really, absolute nonsense. Because at the same time they're basically sending migrants immigrants straight into the country, and they're coming from other nations that would have regimes that would need to be looked at, and the people that are left behind from these countries, these are the people that are forgotten. The Irish they can shout about, they've taken maybe 200 or 300 from Afghanistan or whatever, but what about the people that are left behind? And what about the regime that they have to live under? That's really what should be looked at, rather than this superficial sort of nonsense.
It's virtue signaling. The idea that we're saving anybody by bringing them to this country. There are something like 1,500 million Africans in Africa, and many of them are perfectly decent standard of living. But say if there's, we can't take anything like, we can have no realistic impact on those 1,500 million people with a country of 5 million ourselves. So it's virtue signaling, it's nonsense. And we're just giving ourselves a challenge to integrate all these people. We always integrated new people into the country. It's healthy for people to marry into other cultures and other cultures to marry into ours, but it would only happen at a rate of maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. Now we've got 20% of, and our 20% has come in 30 years, maybe 20 years, whereas in the UK, it came over 150 years. So this is just, we have given ourselves a very volatile challenge, and the biggest indicator of social conflict is population change. So, if you look through history, whenever you see conflict, the biggest indicator that conflict is happening is because there's been population change. And the last time this happened was the plantations. And it's taken 400 years for us to accept Irish Protestants, and they're identical almost ethnically to us. So we've given ourselves a challenge which is just it's extremely ambitious and highly likely to have lots of failures. And so that's the commercialism. And that's what you're seeing in all these policies, with the language, with the Irish language. Yes, you've got the virtue of, and that's a great thing. And in many ways, if we hadn't won our independence, we wouldn't have a language commissioner in Europe or whatever we've just got. That's I'm sure the Welsh and the Scottish haven't got it. That is a mark of our of having achieved some level of maturity. But for the language itself, I mean, for the preservation of the Gaeltacht of Connemara, that's going to make it difficult because you've got a lot of migrant workers in there now because of the tourist industry. And to keep the language going, practically, okay, you can show the 1 or 2 people who've learned the language and praise them up, but actually, realistically, that's unlikely to happen. What the most likely thing to happen is going to be English used more and more in those places. And it's now the only, we may have a county area. The Gaelscoil are doing great, but yet in the Gaelscoil, you're not seeing many non-nationals in the Gaelscoil. You're seeing almost none, and so the Irish language is going to be carried on mostly by the Irish, with some really good people who are gone to the effort of participating from elsewhere. But it's going to make it harder. Now, I know the Irish language community are generally very woke and don't like to think of it like that, especially the the non-Gaeltacht people. But that's the realities for our culture. It's going to be a challenge. Now, can you say that they will bring something? Of course they're going to bring something. Of course we're going to learn something from them. But this is, make no mistake, it's a commercially driven reason those people are here. They are here to undermine the wages and conditions and to keep the rental prices of property up. And that's what it always was, and that's what the old trade union leaders used to know. That's what they took as without questioning.
Of course, it would increase it.
So I think the aggression aspect of it, which was the final stage of mass formation. What were we saying about that, Mike?
Yeah, well, it's just basically the third and the fourth one, the increase in anxiety and the increase in aggression, they would kind of be interwoven with the lack of meaning and the lack of bonding. So, in other words, you'd actually precipitate the other two. So they're all kind of interwoven as such. But the increase in aggression would be precipitated by the media basically, and presenting people in certain groups, or this group was downtrodden or whatever, and you have to fight for your rights or whatever, but rather than individual responsibility and moving towards a meaning, other than ourselves. So it was
Yeah.
always kind of like, or the push in the media would be like, the rights of a certain group of people, but in fact, individual responsibility was kind of, you could say, it was pushed to the side, and just people were pushed into groups and divisions, and that's basically what would have been happening just before COVID. Where individual responsibility, which is important when you have a good connection, a good faith, and that's why I say it kind of links back to the second one, which is the lack of meaning. If you do have the lack of meaning, then you shift away from individual responsibility and you move towards the group.
Yeah, I mean, you see that directly. The the increase in aggression from it comes from the morality. Our prison population was much lower back in the 80s. I saw some figures today that the number of immigrants in jail now is the same number of Irish people we had in the whole system back in whenever. No, smaller populations and everything, but we are seeing that the morality is saying that it's gone away from forgiveness, of a community-based resolution to this woke culture that you exclude people and you can't other them and you cancel them and you try and exterminate them and their ideas from, so they are unacceptable. Like Trudeau said, fringe people with unacceptable ideas. And so you're what they're looking to do is exclude people. And of course, the weird thing, of course, is that they're trying to include, they're trying to create a multicultural environment while excluding people, mostly the natives. And nobody's asked for this multicultural society, but it's a ideology which has been given supremacy in Ireland. It's been given a place above preservation of traditional communities. It's been favoured. Policies which favour multiculturalism are, the policy, in comparison, the policies favouring traditional communities are very weak. So, you're seeing this kind of ideology, and then you're, and at the heart of it, there's a lack, there's a hypocrisy to it. And I can't quite get, we're like a lot of these things, we're trying to, it all has hit us so quickly and come up on so suddenly. We're finding words to explain all this. We're having to work out how we're going to win this, because we've never faced this before. And it's the same with the moral issues of, all of a sudden we're finding that traditional voices are being, excluded, and the aggression then is coming at us to exclude us and to nearly destroy the old normal that we had, the tradition. It's as if they can't do this quick enough, and that what will relieve our anxiety is when that's all destroyed and we've got a woke new world. And but that's not going to happen, because you look at the case of women. Look at violence against women. For all the wokeness that's around, the violence against women is unchanged, or probably worse. I would say sexual violence seems to be going up. And then all the woke policies of not even allowing women to represent themselves as who they see they are, because they have to include trans men in their identity, and women won't do that. And having and then you've got these fringe cases of the trans men or trans women. I don't even know which one's which, but the men who claim to be women in the female prisons and in female spaces. So women are feeling less and less safe. Has to be said too that the experience from Paris, Stockholm, and Oslo is that uh, in these cities, 50% of the rape cases, of the sexual assault cases, are committed by a proportion of the population which is less than 5%, which is the immigrant community, mostly the Muslim community, because there is an unwillingness to face the reality of what the attitude of the religion is towards women who are not considered worthy, you know. So, the woke ones or the multiculturalists, they want to create this new world. They want to make it as quickly as they can, but they're failing on so many levels. And then there's more anxiety amongst them because they see it all falling away. They see the rise of the traditionalists like ourselves, and that frightens them. So they want to get more aggressive and shut us down even more. But we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the nonsense of the last 30 years. I mean, our movement is very much a reaction against the insane social liberalism that's been going on.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Because I suppose they've distorted the term rights, from a scientific point of view, biological point of view, in the colleges. They've basically kind of distorted it totally, where you have massive amounts of genders. I don't know how many, but I mean it's kind of so complicated now that when children are going up to their teens or whatever, like they're not being allowed to be a small bit confused as to how they're to move on in life. They're basically presented with all these options where they could possibly be this and that would sort them out or whatever, but like the individual responsibility of the person is being kind of is being diluted into a kind of a general know your rights and I'm not saying know your rights kind of like as a bad thing. Like it's in effect, as I was saying, the science and the biological in biology in universities are particularly overcomplicated, and the I suppose it appears that they're very what would you say,
they're often offering radical change. The solution is never just sit down and have a cup of tea and think about it. It's we've got to transform everything. We've got to destroy that old world and create a new one, and you've got to destroy your old you and become something else. And these especially with the kids being encouraged to transition, it's always a radical solution, and that is the problem with the radical left. They are too radical, and there's no need for it, and it's coming from them.
And the aggression turns the other way as well when you do question that, or even have a bit of a debate with them. They'll actually turn aggressive, and you're the racist or whatever for just being debating. Why. I suppose you could look into deeply as to why they're becoming aggressive. Because do they really need to be aggressive if they're that comfortable with the decision they've made? You know what I mean? Do they have to protect it that much that they have to that they can't even debate with the other person?
That's true. I mean, and it comes back to the whole morality of unforgiveness, that there is no forgiveness, that there is no, that this has to be resolved with conflict, and, that they have to build their new world on the ruins of your world, that your world has to be destroyed before they can be happy. And, that's what we are reacting to. We are seeing our world being destroyed, things, and I mean, nobody minds pulling down an old building to put something up better, but what we're seeing is not better at all. And, I mean, you're looking at one of the things which really shook me into this new thing was the grooming gang scandals in the UK. Just to see how the institutions of the state were just completely incapable of dealing with very severe abuse. Just because it couldn't acknowledge that its vision was flawed and that this wasn't working. And so their vision isn't working. And it's becoming increasingly clear that we have to slam the brakes on this. And no, we're not trying to destroy them. We're just saying you can't keep on doing this. This is insane, and that's where it has to go. And I think that it's a reasonable conclusion to have. And then let's have the debate about where we go then. I think woke is over, to be honest, Mike. I think the woke ones know that the game is up, and I think this whole COVID thing has really exposed it. And I think they're going to try and keep the narrative going. They've got more tricks up their sleeves, but we're in a contest now. And we know we're in it, and we've probably come together a bit quicker than they were expecting. And we've recognized it quicker than they're expecting, and we're organizing, and the public mood is with us, and their vision of, you will own nothing but be happy eating bugs, taking cold showers as you're a scourge on the planet, and we slowly make less and less of you, is not a vision which inspires anybody. And they know that they've got a real image problem now. Nobody likes them. They're the worst kind of bureaucratic authoritarianism. I mean, nobody minds a fella that you can fight, but the ones that stand behind desks are like Trudeau there, skulks off after causing so much trouble. And then when the people come into Ottawa, he sneaks off, and claims that he's been persecuted. It's a very very bad image that's been painted, and I think that they're not going to recover for it. And there's a lot of opportunities there for us, Mike. And you were saying about options. I mean, in media, you got Joe Rogan, 10 times as many views as CNN. This is the future. This is where even our little chat here. This is the kind of thing that can develop into, into something really. This is the El Dorado of the future. Whereas they're trying to mine personal information, that's their El Dorado. Our El Dorado is I suppose at first we've got to expose and counter their narrative, but then we can when we've done that, we can promote our vision, and we will not be discredited, and we have a vision for the future, and we know what it is,
and we can see a lot of the we can see what's ahead, and we've got glimpses of it already, like in our restaurants and stuff. Like things have got very roboticized. I've seen people, they just walk in and there's no cross communication. It's just a communication in a little group
Yeah.
of 3 or 4 and put on your mask and walk
Yeah,
out again.
yeah, that's it. That's done it.
I think it's very roboticized,
Yeah,
and that's that if that's the road that we're going down, and like China is at the moment, the social
yeah,
credits, as you say, we need to put the brakes on,
yeah,
and we have to go for the preservation of the spirit of the person.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And free will, free speech, and all that, because that's been eradicated and been given superficial coverage. In the media, and they're presenting this as being a future.
yeah.
I mean, I think they've overplayed their hand.
Definitely.
I do hope that's the case, and that
Mm.
there appears to be there appears to be a good sizable awakening at the moment, and I hope
Mm.
it's from that 40%, not not from the 30% that are already awake. I would hope that there's a gradual pull from that
Yeah.
group of people.
I
I
really
think
do.
there
I
is.
really think so.
You
Yeah,
know,
I really do think that they're becoming fair. They are wanting to recognize fairness and exercise their balanced judgment, and they're not seeing that in the other crowd. I mean, if it goes, some people are preparing for the worst. No harm to prepare for the worst.
mm,
You know the the potential collapse of the economy and
mm,
all that. I mean, China's in a bit of trouble at the moment. They've got housing. Bit of a housing bubble has just burst, or they've had a kind of Lehman's Brothers
yeah,
moment just in the
yeah,
last
yeah,
month over there. So, but I think that the global financiers are probably going to come up with some kind of a fix.
yeah, yeah.
But if there was a global collapse, I mean, Ireland's golden age was following the collapse of empire, and it's because we were able to establish local networks, and things go well when everybody knows what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to establish security and order in the clan system, in the parish system, in our strong communities. And then what we found we were in a position to do then was to go to other places where there was a lawlessness, like Britain at the time, and establish order there. And that golden age was not just a golden age for Ireland, but there was a resurgence of Celtic culture in Europe, in Britain, and in Gaul, headed by the people who were still Celtic, which was the Irish. And so that happened. We established order, and then we established morality and Christianity and all those things. So these things are always opportunities. But hopefully, I mean, it would be good if we could do what John Waters was saying, which is take the best of this, of what the multinationals' wealth created here, and just use it for our benefit and our vision, and get our vision. What is our vision? I don't think Micheál Martin or I think the only thing that they know is that they are there to deliver Ireland into a global system.
Yeah.
That I don't think they have a vision for Ireland. I mean, I think they like doing Irishy things and seeing culture. They know how to do that, but I don't know if they have an aspiration for our future, irrespective of what happens in the rest of the world. And I think they need that.
I don't think they actually see it, because they're cushioned by the how they don't have, let's say, they don't have the anxiety of financial worries. The vast majority of the politicians, apart from the ones that got caught up in debt traps, in buying property and stuff like that, but they wouldn't have that anxiety. So basically they don't see it. They don't see it in the other people either.
Yeah.
The vast majority of them, and they don't want to let go of it either. You know, they apart from one or two politicians, there isn't many there now at the moment. You know, they're basically, you could say, apart from one or two, they're all basically pro Europe. You know, and anyone that's in pro Europe, as far as I'm concerned, they're not they don't have the best interest of this country at heart, because they haven't looked at it properly. They're looking at it through the eyes of, you know, the corporations who actually run the EU. You know, and they want this country to be run like a corporation with large tech companies. You know, and you know, praise the Irish public for the wonderful education system they have and all this sort of nonsense. You know, but leaving behind the true Irishness of the country, and, you know, diluting it totally, and, you know, that's the way I see it, you know.
I mean, the aftermath of this will inevitably be that people will not trust the media, number one. I think that depending on how this goes, we could see a real, if there is accountability for what's happened, they have strayed far, far out of their own capabilities into a, you know, they've tried something on a level which has never been tried before. It's been a big bluff, and it could just all fail on them. One of the big problems they have is that the whole COVID thing will be resolved at an international level. So probably New York, or the interrogation of Fauci, is where it'll all fall apart.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the Irish government has no control over that. They can't sweep it under the mat. They're going to be exposed. And when that happens, they'll be there going, well, we were only told, and that won't be good enough for anyone. So what then happens is, we could see, and what we have to do now is we have to get our narrative out there, let people know that we were the ones who challenged this. Sinn Féin didn't, People Before Profit didn't, and so we need to get that message out there fairly quickly. We need to maybe, you know, be addressing them directly, getting in touch with them, get it on record where they are with all this. And then, you know, as people put two and two together, we're in a position where we have been seen to be the ones who were willing to stand up and call it correctly. So, you know, we're in a position where, you know, we are establishing our presence now. How are we doing that? We're doing it with the rallies. The rallies, then people come together, they get each other's phone numbers, and then they start to work on initiatives. And those initiatives are numerous. Like, there's the signboards, that's all media, that's getting out our narrative. There's the legal notices, which are very effective. There's challenging in the courts. So, like what John and Gemma are doing, you know, this is really important, and this is how we establish ourselves and how we win. From then on, we've got to, you know, once we win the trust of the people, we've got a platform that we could take forward. Whether the politics is rigged, so it's very difficult to create change through politics, but we have a network of individuals who are making things unworkable, as are all the people who aren't taking the vaccines. So the guards, the teachers, and the nurses that aren't taking the vaccines, they're incredibly valuable because they are making the system unworkable, and they are fighting the civil war within the institutions in a pressure cooker. So those people are far more valuable than, you know, each one of them is worth half a rally, really.
Yeah.
And we have to get into that frame of thinking. We have to recognize that they are winning too with us. They are standing up, and we have to see things like that.
Yeah, and also there's another thing that I was thinking about there recently, that like if the vaccinated are being like shouted down, or like we're the purebloods or whatever,
No.
You're basically leaving them with a problem and no solution.
Yeah.
And that you're back into the same cycle again.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know enough about it to speak about it, but I don't know. Is there any sort of scientific research or investigation into the neutralizing of the vaccines? I don't know, but I would hope there's something there. You know what I mean? Like it's it doesn't do much good. You know, shouting about the people who are vaccinated and putting them down or anything like that.
Yeah.
You can defend yourself fair enough if someone that's vaccinated shouts at you and calls you fool or whatever. Of course you can defend yourself and use the minimum of force, with words to defend where you stand on it. But I think there would be a lot of vaccinated people that would be very uncomfortable at the moment, and how do you get across that line? How do you get across that line? Like
it's. I think one thing we mustn't do is assume anything, because we don't know. And some people are seeing this vaccine as very sinister, and there has definitely been deaths and injuries. But at the moment, it's just at that level. We can't go to a level that it's not at. So we can't say that this is a genocide, because we're not seeing that. If we start to see people starting to, this starting to accelerate, then we're in a different situation. But we're still a long way from calling out some of those names. Now, and I think that we can't do that. I think that we have to.
Not yet, but 10% more deaths, in excess deaths in 2021 is excessive, really. And that's they can't really cover that for too long more, and they're going to have to come up with a proper debate, truthful debate about that, and I would hope that would be their undoing fairly quickly,
Or else they're going to have a race for totalitarianism. I mean, if they've got enough authority to ban all dissent, and ban any dissent about the 10% increase in deaths, they may rush. There would be plenty of them that will rush for that. The Ahern's, Ardern's, and the Trudeau's will, under those circumstances, may well go for that. Alternatively, they've got it was only orders narrative. But I think that if we're going to win the double vaxxed on our side, we can't be talking like that, because that's very frightening for them. And they're going to dismiss us if we say that COVID is a hoax, because they knew that it was something.
Some sort of a flu,
so that's a narrative we can't use if we're going to win the middle ground. The other narrative we can't use is that they're all going to die, because that's what's the point if we've got to have a future, and so we're not even seeing that yet, and we may never see it, but we've got enough to win. We've got we've so much to expose there. It really doesn't matter at this stage whether it's 30, 40, 50%. They've passed the level at which it's a national scandal. You know, it's more than a national scandal. It's a treacherous. There's a element of traitor to this, and you know, because the traitor does harm. Nobody minds somebody who is just doesn't believe in supporting ourselves. But when your belief in destroying your own culture and society turns to actual damage, you know that when you are one of these, um, there's a name for them, but sociologically, there's a group of people who um, uh, destroy their own society. You know, it's like every tenth tadpole is a cannibal. You know, so that some of them can. But there's a very clever name for them. But these kind of people, when they've become in government and they're doing harm, there really isn't a way around. We've got everything we need from them to win this morally and ethically. So we don't need to up it or make it more worse than it is. And I hope it never does get any worse.
Hopefully not.
You know,
Hopefully not.
and we can. And I think that the people who have been double jabbed will be more annoyed than anybody else. I think they will be more angry, and possibly some of the people who have really gone to the totalitarian extreme that have were wanted to believe the narrative for their own in a hypocritical way. I think some of those may also become very dangerous to the establishment, because they may, you know, they may be looking to betray their own to reestablish their righteousness that they so badly desire. You know. So I think that's the way it works.
Well, let's hope we can preserve into the future the spirit of the nation. You know. The Irish, true Irish spirit. You know. And preserve, you know, going forward, you know, keep telling the truth. You know,
keep on believing ourselves. Having a vision for ourselves and demanding a future for ourselves. You know, and you know, I think that having a purpose, you know, surrounding ourselves with you know, our traditions, our faith, you know, the 20, 30 generations of wisdom. You know, there's no this is what happens when you dump it. You know, that we just got to. There's only one way back. That's to find it again.
And that's it. That's the elderly. Like, I mean, as I said before about the elderly. Like, I mean, that's probably one of the worst parts of the whole thing is the elderly dying on their own when in fact that's the point where they dispense with the most truthful lines, and you know, in the last few weeks of their life or whatever, and that is not the case, or hasn't been the case for a lot of family members, and that was totally and utterly diabolically wrong, and it's still going on as far as I know in the North Slums, and I think you have to be vaccinated now to see your loved one or whatever.
Definitely, it is the case.
I mean,
I think they're trying to free it up a bit, but there's a lot of people looking at their elderly relatives through the window, you know, waving to them through the window, that kind of thing. And some places are more strict than others. But I think that will be the abiding legacy. You know, the whole thing was supposed to be a kind of telebingo, save the world through getting yourself vaccinated, you know. And everybody was invited to participate in this, you know, save the world event. And I think that they will realize that won't be so often is the case. I mean, we were talking about the narrative of the famine, that the narrative was that the Irish, there's just too many of them and they won't work. And that was the narrative they wanted at the time. That was the narrative everyone was expected to participate in. The narrative now is that it was genocide committed by an imperial by imperial cruelty.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of telly bingo save the world thing that Claire Byrne might have liked to. That was her promotion. I think that's not going to be the legacy. That the image people are going to remember is the nursing homes, the elderly dying on their own, and that's so often the case.
Yeah. So.
And hopefully that's as bad as it will.
Hopefully.
Bad and all as that is, hopefully that's as bad as it needs to be.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be any worse.
No.
For demanding a total transformation of what has gone on, because it's a symptom of all the things that are wrong.
Yeah.
So, Mike, I think that's pretty much us there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about
We've had a big long Joe Rogan
it's a long
interview
one,
there, isn't it? That's his kind of length there, isn't it? And so maybe this is a model which happens naturally, Mike. Go on, we'll press the button before we run out of power.
Oh my God.